and welcome to another Ask an Arborist series where we answer your questions about trees growing in the city of Seattle. My name is Charlie, and I work at Forterra, where I partner with the city of Seattle to coordinate the Trees for Seattle Tree Ambassador Program. We work with Seattle residents to care for, learn about, and appreciate the trees growing here in our city. Today, I am joined by two of my colleagues.
Hey, my name is Lisa Seco. I'm a plant ecologist with Seattle Parks and Recreation.
I'm Michael Yadrick. I'm also one of the plant ecologists at Seattle Parks and Recreation, and we support Green Seattle Partnership.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. So let's jump into our question. Our question comes from Ash, who lives in Lake City. And Ash asks, what kinds of trees in Seattle are you most excited to work with? Michael, why don't you go first?
Sure, I'll start. So my favorite tree is Pacific madrone because it's the best. It's pretty iconic. It's a sacred tree. People have had relationships with the tree for eons. It's pretty charismatic because it's not like a straight up and down tree. It really defies gravity. You often see it growing out of cliffs, often close to the saltwater, and even on the Lake Washington side of the city as well.
Cool. And where are some cool places that you can see it in the city?
Pretty much every corner of the city. So you go from one end to the other. Really, we think of the best spots are really in the southwest part of town, in Arroyo's natural area or Ciolo Greenbelt. But you can also find them at Lincoln Park, Discovery Park, Madrona Park, and actually the largest patch that we actually have is a mixed madrone forest in Seward Park, where you can find it mixed up with, or you can find it growing up next to Douglas fir.
Okay, and you work primarily in our natural spaces in the city, and I have the assumption, and maybe this is wrong, that the madrone are just really hard to just plant and grow. Like they're kind of picky in where they like to grow.
That's right. I think the condition, really have to get the conditions right. Like it is not uncommon to see them growing up next to black cottonwoods, which like in somewhat wetland conditions, but they won't thrive there. So anywhere where their roots are wet and inundated or saturated with moisture, they won't thrive there. So often you'll find them on, like I said, the coastal bluffs where they're into these fast draining soils.
Gotcha. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. So Lisa, maybe let's kick it over to you. What kind of trees are you most excited to work with in the city?
Well, I thought it would be fun to share Gary Oak with everybody today. I think it's a really special tree in Seattle. It's also known as Oregon white oak, which is kind of more the common name in Oregon and California, or Quercus garryana is the scientific name, or the Lachute seed name is Cha'adat, which is the first time I've ever attempted to pronounce that in public, but I think is an important part of why it's such a special tree. It is an important food source. The acorns are an important food source for the Coast Salish folks who live here in the Seattle area and up and down the West Coast. And in our landscape, seeing a Gary Oak is really seeing a long history of the stewardship of that land and the use of fire to open up spaces and keep back the Douglas fir and other conifers. And so when you get to see those in Seattle parks, it talks about the long history.
Well, what are some good places in the city to see it specifically in natural areas?
Yeah, so there's only two parks actually that we have older Gary Oaks, Seward Park in Southeast Seattle and Martha, Washington, which is just south along the shoreline, farther south from Seward Park. And there are Gary Oaks also sprinkled through the Rainier Beach neighborhood and Seward Park neighborhood there as well.
You mentioned how there's a history with people using fire as a way to maintain the landscape so that these would thrive. Do you use fire in our natural areas or anything like that to make sure that these habitats where they live are still there in these parks?
Unfortunately, no. I think that's one of the complicating factors for us, is that we want to be able to restore some of these spaces to include more Gary oak, but we really don't have that in our toolkit in the city at this point, given the risk of fire and issues associated with it. But there are other things that we're looking at. I mean, one piece is doing invasive plant removal and continuing to keep those spaces open so that Gary oak have the full sun that they need to grow healthy and strong.
Those are both beautiful and magnificent trees. I highly recommend going to go check those out. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank you, Ash, for your question. If any of you out there have a question for a future video, please email us at treeambassador@seattle.gov. I also recommend going to our website, where you can find a tree walk in one of Seattle's neighborhoods. You can find out how to get a free tree through our Trees for Neighborhoods program, and you can find out how to become a tree ambassador yourself. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you out there in our urban forest.